Good evening and welcome to this edition of Tok Piksa. In the studio tonight we have Lanna Kami, a founding member of the Coalition for Change. Lanna, welcome to the studio for tonight's Tok Piksa. And tonight we speak about CFC, the Coalition for Change. Please tell us more about that.
Okay, thank you, Neville. Coalition for Change was founded way back in 2007. It was basically the result of, if no one remembers, there was a horrendous crime that was committed against a woman by the name of Mrs. Tom, where her baby got ripped out of her. And in response to the news article that was published by Post Courier, the very next day we had petitions, a huge petition signed where we had over 3,000 signatures. And then that resulted in a march taking that petition to Parliament House. The petition was presented by Dame Carol at that time, and basically that's when government started standing up and saying, look, this is not acceptable anymore, let's make a stand. And after that, there were several founding members with led by Lady Winifred Carmet, Miss Few Williame Igara, she was then the secretary for the NEC. That was Miss Winnie Kiap, who's now High Commissioner in London, and Rosemary Robertson, who was also one of the forces behind. It became an issue that something had to be done, and the most likely change would have to be, say, legislative change. So Coalition for Change formed on those principles. We were focused on legislative, promoting legislative change, advocating against any change to do with gender-based violence or familial violence, and basically making and encouraging others to make a stand in the community. Since we're founded in 2007, we've since had one major project, and that is that was in relation to hiring and drafting draftsmen to draft the Family Protection Bill, which is now the Family Protection Act. And hopefully by next year we should roll out with the regulations, which are currently being developed and redrafted as well. And hopefully it should come into full force by this time next year. I'm hoping that I can come and tell you that you can now get an interim protection order against any offender, and the act of domestic violence will be a criminal act.
So the CFC, the Coalition for Change, is a not-for-profit organization.
Yes, it is.
It's obviously headed by a lot of high-profile personalities, women, and the focus is on addressing the issues of gender violence and more specifically violence in homes.
Yes.
Is there a reason why it's pointed towards that?
If there's one thing that has to be taken care of, the foundation of basically our society would be the home. You've heard the phrase, everything begins at home, so we're trying to bring that in, that home should not just be the house, shouldn't be just the place you go and eat and sleep. It should be the safest place basically your core place of safety. We could have looked at gender-based violence and, women being violated in general, but I think we just wanted to bring is, number one, we just started with a home, that to be a core foundation here.
And since 2007, you've mentioned the Family Protection Bill, which is now an act.
Yes.
Any other major achievements by the CFC?
For Coalition for Change, we've got we really wanted to focus on getting this done because it was something that needed to be done as soon as possible. It was way overdue. Basically, it was a response from the Law Reform Commission report, which was way back in the 1980s. We've just focused on getting that done. It's been a bit of an effort because just the office of two people, because we're not for profit, can't really afford to go beyond the scope and go. On top of that, it's run by a voluntary board as well, so it's not something that we wanted to really stretch ourselves, but this was our core focus. Our plan is, within the next few years, is to take it on another level, and the awareness in different parts of society. So within the next few years, one focus area will be businesses, houses of business, or workplaces, places of employment. Hopefully within the next 10 years or so, I'd like to be able to say that we've been able to roll out different programs in schools, in churches, advocacy and awareness. But there are a lot of people doing a lot of things, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel here. So, basically we'll just go and see how we're going to take this thing forward. But our focus is on family violence.
And the strong point that the CFC advocates for is that domestic violence is a public matter and not a private one. Could you explain that?
Absolutely. Domestic violence, okay, the effect, people seem to think that, look, it happens behind closed doors, it doesn't have anything to do with you, like you have that mentality where you hear something going on in the home, you just walk past, okay? It's a private matter. What we're trying to do is that, focus, look, you don't seem to tell offenders or tell society, you don't seem to realise that it's not just the people at home that get affected, okay? It's the person that goes to work and affects his or her work, Sometimes it doesn't even stay at home, you have harassment at the workplace, you have the endless phone calls or you have, the offender coming up to a place of work and, demanding, to be let in, to see, to see the victim or the family member and abusing them there. The abuse of emails, the abuse of, just basically, and disrupting a workplace as well.
Papua New Guinea traditionally is a violent culture. We've moved on from there, but like you said, bringing the violence out into the open for people to acknowledge it is a big step forward. Where are we compared to other countries in the world?
In some places, not very different. You can't really say that we're extremely violent because, believe me, regardless of race, creed, violence really has no barriers. Domestic, education level, it could be the person, you can't say it has something to do, because he's poor, or because he's unemployed, or he or she has, is of a certain religion or something. It really has no barriers. So studies have shown with PNG, it's 2 out of 3 women in PNG will have suffered some form of violence. It's because she is a woman, okay? Some form of abuse. So it's, if we were to compare the 2 out of 3 in comparison to, say, a country that has 1 out of 10, we're pretty, we're pretty on the high scale. But then again, it really is difficult for us to measure because it's always been an issue that's kept silent. People know about it, and victims themselves will sit there and just go, it's none of anyone's business. But it's not so much to expose, their vulnerability, but it's just to assist them to strengthen themselves. It's not, I can't really say in comparison to other countries because there are no boundaries for violence, but unfortunately. But for us, we're looking at a 2 out of 3 for every woman. So the public can go around and start counting 2 out of 3 women, and basically you'll start feeling faint about it too.
Next Tuesday, the 25th of November. Now that's a big day for the CFC.
Yes,
All around the world commemorates a day that looks at addressing issues of gender violence and violence against women and girls. And how are we celebrating it in here in PNG?
Well, with CFC, we've always held a function where we've had international guest speakers come in for the past few years. So this year we will be having a breakfast where we have 2 guest speakers. One will be Dan Carroll, who we owe a lot to for finally bringing that petition up to Parliament. And the second is Reverend Serema Lomaloma, who's actually from Fiji, and she is one of the board members for the Women's Crisis Centre in Fiji. She's also the first ordained Anglican female minister in the Pacific. PNG doesn't recognise ordained female ministers, but one of the barriers that she's broken recently is their approach in relation to the violence and the church, and how religion isn't something that can be used as an excuse for violence in the home. So we're hoping to hear lots of positive messages from her experience of being able to counteract that in Fiji, and the other programs that she's been involved with around the Pacific as well.
Okay, and the theme for the breakfast is businesses say no to violence against women.
Yes.
Why the focus on businesses here?
Okay, basically, your workplace, like I said earlier on, your workplace is an area where you should also feel safe as well, and it affects workplaces as well. So you can't say that it stops at your door, or you drop it at the door of the reception the minute you walk in. That's a problem. It affects businesses in terms of if it were about production, if we're about absenteeism, or the extended and some very good workers that unfortunately cannot continue to work properly because they are being abused or affected in some way from abuse. So what we're trying to do is also for businesses to make a stand, to be able to stand there and go, hey, you're affecting my you're affecting this area that I need a happy worker here. I need someone who is comfortable enough to be able to come and work and not be interfered in any way. So we've had responses from several businesses themselves have taken on, their own stand against, and put in their own policies in relation to no tolerance, for both employers, for both their employees, as well as just their general support. But like I said, it's family being the foundation, and now we're trying to spread that realm into, spread that awareness and advocacy realm into businesses. We're also trying to make it a point that this is something that you should make your business. It is your business. It's not a private matter. It does spill out onto the workplace as well.
And can you tell us what feedback you've had from businesses that you've spoken to?
Well, a number of businesses have come forward and said in the past few years, they've come back and said that they're very encouraging. We've had some CEOs, after listening to us, and they've actually made, I believe one sent out an email straight away and said, there's a no tolerance. 3 days later, they had actually terminated a person because of the violence in the workplace. A number of them have also come back. They've also been doing their own. They've also had their own internal policies how they've dealt with internally, but it's assisted them to be able to turn around and go, hey, I'm tired of getting my property damaged. I'm tired of getting. I don't want to lose a good worker because he or she is a victim in some way. So it's opened for some, it's opened their eyes. For others, it's been a more positive relief stage, where they've been able to come forward.
Mm. Okay. So, outside of the home, obviously violence occurs everywhere. How do businesses deal with that? If, say, or what would the CFC suggest to businesses if you have co-workers who are violent towards their colleagues in the office?
You know, right now, unfortunately, businesses themselves, private sector, doesn't really have a wooden leg to stand on in relation to, unless, of course, they make a stand. Okay. No business can turn around and say that they haven't had the issue of an abusive, spouse of an employee, come and abuse them in some way. It's a bit difficult. I would encourage each and every person or business or employer, to actually just, for starters, just get together and adopt a policy, an internal policy that says what their stand is, how far they're going to take it. We've got in the makings right now just to encourage each employer to come up with their own, say, domestic violence response team. That's not so little businesses can go and create their own little armies. No, what we would like to see is that they have a pin team within the company for a person to be able to go to if they're affected in some way, or if they need, safety or something. So hopefully we hope to have, say, a point person that can do first point of call counselling. After that, they are able to basically, they recognise it, they refer it, they recognise it, they're able to do something about it, and then they refer it on to the proper authorities. And that would be whether to take it to police, where they have units now to deal with family and sexual violence units, or where it has to go to court, where they have, say, interim protection orders, and hopefully by next year, like I said, permanent protection orders as well, or just assistance in any other way, extra security. There are many things that people can do, but one big thing is the victim being able to know that he or she can come forward and not be discriminated against in any way, and be assisted, knowing that they have a safer future.
Going back to the family protection bill, you mentioned interim protection orders. What other aspects? Could you just run through the main points of the bill, and that's now an act?
Okay, basically the act now defines domestic violence. Now, domestic violence can be, and it specifically comes out as, it can be physical, it can be psychological, it can be sexual, can be the threat, damage to property, the threat of damage to property or being physical. We also have it further to cover forms of abuse being emails and texts and stalking as well. Okay, so we've gone a bit high tech over here. We're one of the very few countries that have actually included texting and abuse of that. But it further says that allows for, if you would like someone to stop abusing you, you go and lodge a complaint against them and ask for an interim protection order. Now, the interim protection order is specifically for 30 days. This stops the offender. It can be extended for another 30 days if you want to extend it, going back to court and applying for another extension for 30 days. Now, three things I must say. Incarceration is not the solution to a lot of these matters. Okay, so it's not about them putting them straight in, and they're going straight to Bomano or to any other form of kalabus. But what we try to encourage is that it be that during that time of separation, this person goes for counselling, the offender goes for counselling. Okay, this offender goes for mediation with the two parties. They are on a good behaviour bond. Okay, it could be just a cooling off period. Okay, or it could be something where it is, well, basically it's the first step to the family finally being separated, or ending the abuse. But the firm thing is its goals to looking forward to ending the abuse altogether. Second thing is that violence does not stop, okay? It does not stop automatically if there's an IPO, okay? Seriously, I mean, showing a piece of paper, okay, to some offenders doesn't really mean much. Okay? But this is basically just to get them to stop, to rethink, okay? Reassess what they can lose if they continue this violence. So hence the other conditions that are added on. Now, if the person has, if the offender has breached this order, the penalty for breaching can be anything up to 3 years in prison or a fine of up to 10,000 kina. Okay. Or both at the same time. So, but the thing is, like, we don't really want to go around fining and, you know, or putting people in prison. We want to be able to have them, offenders, to sit down and rethink, you know, what exactly can they do to make, you know, what are they doing, you know? Is there something that's, you know, is there something that they need to fix within themselves before they go, you know, counselling, okay? Do they really need to shout at each other? You know, maybe things just have to be, you know, they need to know how to talk to each other properly, hence mediation. You know? Yeah, and various other options. Every courtroom, when faced with an IPO or faced with, every magistrate will tell you, we don't want to break up families. It's not about breaking families up, no. What we want to do is try and find a way, okay, to try and fix these relationships and families.
Okay, so next Tuesday is a big day, and anybody can commemorate that day also and be part of the drive by wearing a red ribbon or displaying a white ribbon. Sorry.
White ribbon,
white ribbon.
White ribbon.
Yeah. Okay, and the symbolism of the white ribbon is
the symbolism of the white ribbon actually came many years ago. It was something that was adopted by men in Canada. It was there's a long story about that. They did a march. Men in Ontario, I believe, made a big commitment and, you know, did a march and said, look, enough against violence against women. The white ribbon was chosen as a symbol for men to make a stand against violence against women. Here in PNG, it's pretty significant in terms of when it comes to anything, because we're such a male-dominated society. I mean, in terms of if anything really has to be said or directed, most would really listen to the man. And what we're really hoping is that this is a time for men in PNG to actually make a stand themselves and show that they are against violence against women. And so it's really pushing the male advocacy to come out. So,
Miss Lanna Kami?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for all that.
Thank you.